Hi, today we're going to make cornbread. It's quick and simple and easy to make homemade cornbread. The first thing I'm actually going to do is turn my oven on and let it start preheating. I actually did that a minute ago. We're going to preheat it to 400 degrees. And you also want to go ahead and grease your pans before you start mixing your batter. I've actually already done that, and since these are cast iron pans, I'm going to put them in the oven and let them warm up a little bit. That'll make it easier for me to also then take my pastry brush and ensure that the oil is thoroughly covering the surfaces. So we're going to pop these in the oven. I'm using a cornbread skillet and a corn stick pan today. This batch will also make an 8-inch square or a loaf pan or an 8-inch round, so you can kind of mix the sizes up for whatever your needs are. So, to make cornbread, we of course use a mixing bowl. I kind of like a one of these large measuring cups which has a pourable spout. It makes it easier to pour the batter into the pans. A couple of mixing utensils, whisk, fork for stirring things, spoon, etc. So, ingredients wise, we need 1 cup of flour, a 1/4 cup of sugar. I'm going to be using white sugar today. You could also use brown sugar if you prefer. A cup of cornmeal, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 eggs, 1/4 cup liquid shortening, and a cup of milk. So, let's get mixing. So I'll start by adding my flour to the bowl. 1 cup, I've got a 1/2 cup measuring spoon scoop here. I've stirred the flour up a little bit. If you don't stir your flour, it'll get compacted down and you'll end up with a little too much flour. So 1 cup of flour, a 1/4 cup of sugar, our cup of cornmeal. We need 2 teaspoons baking powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I usually measure my salt in my hand. I know what it looks like. You can try measuring some and pouring in your hand to see, or just use a spoon if you prefer. So I'm just going to stir the dry ingredients together to blend them up. You could also add a little bit of chili powder, like a 1/2 teaspoon or even a teaspoon, or some other dried herbs if you want it to mix up the flavor a little bit, or depending on what it's accompanying. So my dry ingredients are mixed and ready to go. We're going to come over here and work on our liquids. I've got my 2 eggs already in the measuring cup. I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of oil and a cup of milk. So here's our oil, 1/4 cup, and our milk, 1 cup. So there's our liquid ingredients. I'm going to take a minute and mix these up. You want to mix your liquids thoroughly. You don't want to overmix your batter. That is, once you combine the liquids and the dry ingredients, that will make the cornbread tough. So get your eggs mixed thoroughly. Those eggs should be completely blended in there. So I guess you could throw it in a blender or use a mixer if you wanted to. I'm sorry, I like to use a fork. I think that's the simplest way to mix. But you could use, like I said, a blender or a mixer, or just mix it with a fork for a minute. So we still got a little bit in there. We'll just stir that another second, get that all blended good. Okay. Once we've got that blended, got my spoon here, so we're just going to add in our liquid ingredients into the dry ingredients. We don't want to over stir, so we're just going to mix this Give it a few quick stirs. Does need to be blended. You may have a few small lumps in there. That's okay. Don't want big lumps. And you do want to scrape down to the bottom. Make sure you don't have any dry clumps left down there in the corners or in the bottom. So this is probably pretty good here. So I'm going to go ahead and get my pans out of the oven. They've been warming up. You will want to use a pot holder. Oops. And then I'm going to take my pastry brush I mentioned, and I'm going to take and make sure that that oil is completely covering all the surfaces. All those little nooks and crannies have been well coated. We'll mention that it's advisable to use a silicone or a natural fiber brush. If you use a nylon pastry brush, it can melt on the hot surfaces. So again, natural fibers or silicone. So just like I said, take a minute, make sure that oil is spread around and all the surfaces are covered. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to do the same thing on this. Make sure those back edge is covered, got my sides and that corner. So just spread that oil around. If you don't have your surfaces well oiled and well coated, you'll find your cornbread sticks. It still tastes good, but it doesn't look quite as appetizing when it's stuck to the pan. So we've got everything all oiled at this point. We can start pouring our batter in. I do want to just turn this hot hand around a little bit so it's not going to be hitting it. Now again, I like to just use this because it's got the pouring spout. I think it makes it a little easier to control. You could also use like an ice cream scoop, one of those small ice cream scoops. So just put a little bit in each one. You don't want to overfill them, about halfway is good. I think I probably need a touch more in that one. We'll come back and give him a hair at the end. And just continue distributing it. And we'll add a little bit to our corn stick pans. And those you might need to take your spatula and spread out a little bit when you pour it in. Get it evenly distributed. You want to fill the things up about 1/2 to 2/3. If you fill more than about 2/3, it tends to overrun. You can drip down in your oven and make a mess. So we'll just continue filling these. As I said, with these pans, you do want to spread it out a little bit. And I think we're going to have a little more here. We can probably put a little more in those corn stick skillet, or the corn skillet. Let's see how much we have left here after we fill these last two. We'll see who's low. So this was one batch or one recipe. You could also cut this recipe in half, make half as many. Or you could double it if you need to make a larger amount. So we got a couple of these which are a little bit low. We'll just top them off with a hair. Okay, so everybody's filled, and we can pop these back in the oven. These are probably going to bake closer to 12 minutes. If you have a 8x8 pan or a loaf pan, that's going to take closer to 25 minutes. The larger the volume you're baking in one area or once at once, the longer it's going to take. These are, broken up into smaller portions, so they won't take quite as long. So I'm going to set my timer for 12 minutes, and I will see you back here in 12. Okay, our timer is about ready to go off, so let's go ahead and check on our cornbread. It looks pretty good to me. I'm going to give it a quick poke with a toothpick to check. Toothpicks come out dry and clean, so that's a good indication they're done. Let's get out our other pan. So, fresh hot cornbread in about 15 or 20 minutes. So we'll go ahead and just run our knife around the edge here. Oh, these all look pretty loose. It's getting a little cut there where I ran the batter over the edge. And let's go ahead and see how these come out. So, those are out. Let's grab our corn sticks next. And again, I'm just going to take a knife and just make sure they're all wherever we had, especially where we had those little runovers. Just pop that lid. And these look like they're ready to drop out as well. So, fresh cornbread out of the oven, ready for sampling. Ooh, that's hot. Oops, I know what I forgot. That's the butter. Let me grab some butter here. And I'm going to put some butter on there. And I've got a little bit of jelly. Or I actually think I want to start with a little bit of honey. I like honey on my cornbread. You can, of course, put whatever you want on it. I'm going for the honey first. So, nothing beats fresh hot bread right out of the oven. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Happy cooking.